The search for an end to the war in Ukraine. After days of frantic diplomacy, are Ukraine and Russia any closer to peace? US President Donald Trump is pushing for a deal sooner rather than later, but the two warring sides remain far apart. I'm Hazem Sika, and today's Newsmaker is the conflict in Ukraine. An American plan to end the war first emerged just over a week ago. The 28-point plan called for Ukraine to give up territory to Russia and cut its military in half, among other things. Then European diplomats weighed in over the weekend and pushed back with their own proposal, bolstering Ukraine's demands. It's now a familiar pattern that played out earlier in the year after Donald Trump's meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The question remains, after nearly 4 years of grinding stalemate on the battlefield, are Ukraine and Russia any closer to peace?
President Donald Trump's latest push to end the Russia-Ukraine war began last week with a 28-point peace proposal developed by his son-in-law Jared Kushner and envoy Steve Witkoff. But Ukraine and the European Union have criticized the plan, calling it a one-sided concession to Russian demands. Washington's initial offer included security guarantees for Kiev and a commitment from Moscow not to attack Ukraine and Europe again. Yet it would also require Ukraine to give up the entire eastern Donbas region, the already annexed Crimea, and allow Russia to keep the occupied territories in Kherson and Zaporizhia. The proposal also calls for major limits on Ukraine's military, capping personnel at 600,000 and dropping its ambition to join NATO.
This is a complete surrender, in my opinion. That is, there are such points as the surrender of Donbas, the recognition of the second Russian language. This is a complete surrender.
That's how many Ukrainians see it. But then the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, sat down with the Ukrainian side in Geneva to revise the plan. Reports suggest that the new 19-point version removes the limit on Ukraine's military size and includes a NATO-style security guarantee. Still, both sides have left the issue of territory for later. During a meeting with European allies, Ukrainian President Zelenskyy welcomed the changes.
Now we have a good result from Geneva and from the meetings and talks that took place there. Ukraine has the framework developed by our teams in Geneva. That framework is on the table and we are ready to move forward together.
The EU said they now have a starting point for a peace deal and reiterated their support for Ukraine.
There cannot be unilateral carving up of a sovereign European nation, and that borders cannot be changed by force. If today we legitimize and formalize the undermining of borders, we open the doors for more wars tomorrow, and we cannot let this happen.
Meanwhile, Russia, which welcomed Trump's initial plan, says the amendments must reflect the understanding reached by Trump and Putin during the Alaska summit in August.
There can be no talk of concessions or abandoning our approaches to the key objectives we face, including those regarding the special military operation. I stress that various elements of Anchorage itself represent compromise solutions, as President of the Russian Federation has also said.
Negotiations are still ongoing. Steve Witkoff will fly to Moscow next week to meet with President Vladimir Putin, and Zelenskyy says he's ready to talk with Trump to discuss sensitive points. But on the battlefield, the exchange of attacks and fierce fighting continue. For the White House, a peace in the nearly 4 years of war feels within reach. But with so many past attempts having failed, will this latest diplomatic flurry finally deliver the breakthrough that Ukrainians are so desperate for?
Well, joining me now to talk more about this are from Kiev, Secretary General of NAKO, the Independent Anti-Corruption Commission, Olena Tregub. Also from Kiev, American political consultant Jason J. Smart, And from London, Senior Visiting Research Fellow at King's College London, the Russia Institute, Anna Matveeva. Good to have you all with us. So, Olena, let me start with you. Where do things stand right now, as you see it, with these latest diplomatic efforts to end the war?
I'm very skeptical about these efforts because I think that their plan, which was initially presented by the American side, it lacks very important questions, like, for example, how we guarantee that Russia withdraws troops from the border, how Russia is capping its army, how Russia is guaranteeing that it will not attack again. All these points are missing. And as negotiations progress, we don't even know if Russia agrees for ceasefire immediately. So my opinion is that these efforts will fall apart, just like we saw before, and we have been here before. We were before when we thought we are close to making a deal, but turns out Putin is not ready to stop. And if Putin is not ready to stop, then there will be essentially no deal. This is where I stand.
Jason J. Smart, how do you see things, and what, as you see them, are the main sticking points here?
At this point, I think it's just very unrealistic that anything will come of this. I think it's more likely that it's simply trying to slow down the incoming sanctions on Russia, which would be very damaging for the economy. It could wipe out about 40 to 45% of the typical revenue it achieves from oil sales. But there's something else I think that is just generally the economic malaise in the Russian economy is quite striking, and is seeking to lift sanctions by giving the appearance of being interested in beginning peace talks, though I don't think anything will come of them.
All right, then, Anna, the point was made there that we've been down this road before. There's been a flurry of diplomatic activity, but at the end, it doesn't really amount to much. What's your view on that?
I think I differ with your other guests because I think that we are close to the end game, and that end game would perhaps come by the end of this year, maybe early next year. But we will know whether there is a deal or there is a decision not to make a deal. And that is also an outcome. So that would be a qualitatively different situation. And I think that there are three factors in that. One is that the President Trump, who is the key decision maker in that equation, and he is very determined to keep pressure, to keep high pace. He has personal stakes in that. So he is like a locomotive driving the process forward. That may not be enough, but he's very determined. The second thing is the battlefield situation in Ukraine. The Ukrainian army is overstretched. On the front lines, there are high levels of desertion, there are losses, so it can get worse. And the third thing is that the Europe is running out of instruments to decisively press Russia. The only trump card they still have is the frozen Russian assets, but it seems to be that kind of confiscating, in a way, frozen Russian assets is becoming less and less politically viable and becomes quite a divisive issue within the European Union.
Olena, now we first got the news of this 28-point plan that it appears was mostly engineered by the Russians more than a week ago now, and President Donald Trump said he was keen to reach a deal by Thanksgiving. It's Thanksgiving Day now, and reality has set in, and they put that date back now. But does this raise the point that Trump does seem quite impatient to end this war? How concerning is that for you as a Ukrainian?
Well, definitely from what we observe, all the reports are demonstrating to us that actually this plan was drafted by Russians in Russian language, then translated into English, and then American side presented it as if it's their plan. And this is the discussion in political circles in Washington, in media, all these Bloomberg publications. So what I see is that population of United States and political elites, including the ones supporting Donald Trump, they are very worried about this situation, about the fact that, yes, he's impatient to finish the war, but not on Russian terms, because if he does it on Russian terms, that can be an Afghanistan moment for him, which will be detrimental not just for him as a president, but also for American status in the world. And I think because of that, he now actually stopped pushing that hard. He now says that there is no more Thanksgiving deadline and that there is no pressure on Ukraine, and Ukraine should agree on that plan.
Jason, if we talk more specifically here, the whole issue of territorial sovereignty is obviously a very contentious one, and this issue of Ukraine having to give up territory is obviously a difficult one for Ukrainians, but it's not going away. Is Ukraine going to have to make some difficult compromises for the larger effort of ending this war?
Well, I think one of the most important questions here is what a lot of people don't understand about the Donbass, which is what's been discussed, whether Ukraine should give up parts of the territory not currently under occupation to Russia. And to understand the absurdity of this, that area is some of the most protected areas in the Donbass, but more than that, Russia's current casualty rate is about 170 to 180 soldiers per square kilometer. To take the rest of Donbass, it would cost the Russians between 1.25 and 1.5 million more soldiers killed or injured. The Russian economy can't afford this, the Russian military can't afford this, and it's simply untenable for the Russians to try to pursue it. So the only hope they have today of achieving that is if they are able to force it through a peace agreement. Because on their own, as military power, as we've seen, Russia's military is simply a disaster and it has no capacity to do so. So it's hoping to use external pressure from other countries to make this seem normal in a peace process, but it's very far from being normal and is wholly unacceptable.
Anna, the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has warned against what she calls the unilateral carving up of a sovereign European nation, and she went on to say that Russia shows no signs, and again I'm quoting here, of a true willingness to end the conflict. What would you say to that?
I think the same thing is true the other way around. I think the European Union and European Commission precisely, Ursula von der Leyen, also has absolutely no intention to end this conflict. So other than kind of complete Russian capitulation, which I don't think is really a viable prospect. So in that sense, European Union and the Commission showed really very little intention towards diplomacy, and they are imagining that Ursula von der Leyen and Kaja Kallas would be able to negotiate with Russians in any shape or form is just simply impossible. So in that, but we can also have another outcome. We can also have an outcome when Ukraine says, well, Ukrainian leadership says that there will be no deal, that we reject that kind of ideas, understandings which were achieved in Alaska in principle, and that we are going to fight it on. The thing is that we don't really know what is in the Trump's revised peace plan. The Russian side said that we will negotiate on the basis of the plan which would have President Trump's signature and which is given to us through official channels. They have not received that document yet. So we now have a lot of speculation, of course, a lot of misgivings. It's very easy to criticize any prospects for peace. It's much more difficult to find a constructive way out. So that's where we are now.
I want to bring up something as well that is connected with this, although not directly, and that is the whole issue of perceived corruption inside Ukraine. Now, there was this story that came out a couple of weeks ago of kickbacks and money laundering involving the state nuclear power agency, Energoatom, and government officials. Now, Republicans, I want to put this to you, Olena, because since this is part of your area, Republicans in the US, many who support Trump, have seized on this particular issue as proof that Ukraine does not deserve their support. How would you respond to that?
Well, it's actually the opposite. Ukraine deserves support because Ukraine demonstrated that it is a strong state with a strong institution. Ukraine is not about one leader, like Russia is about Vladimir Putin. Ukraine is not about Zelenskyy. Ukraine built very strong democratic institutions inside the country. And Ukrainian state, Ukrainian institutions are the ones who revealed these corruptions, are the ones who fighting this corruption. This corruption was not found by American audit or European audit. It's Ukrainians, Ukrainian men and women in those institutions fighting corruption. So it's a very good sign that even during war, democracy persists and we're able to stop corruption. Of course, it is ugly to see it in the open, but it's much better than what it is in other countries when it is closed, when it is institutionalized, or when it's like authoritarian, like in Russia, when nobody even talks about corruptions because the ones who did are already dead.
What's your view on this, Jason? I mean, does this whole issue of corruption and the Energoatom story risk, if I could put it this way, poisoning support for Ukraine inside the US?
No, at this point it doesn't. It's good that Ukraine is fighting the corruption is a key part here, and it wasn't U.S. assets that were affected by it. This is part of something that I think is very important to note, is that the U.S., of course, was surprised to see it, I think, with the population as a whole. But at the same time, they do appreciate the fact that Ukraine does have a problem with corruption, and they are doing what they can to fight it. They are not hiding it. It's not been concealed. And that's despite the fact that even some of these people were well known to the public. They will face justice just like any other citizen would.
Anna, one of the criticisms that is leveled at Russia in these negotiations is this accusation coming from Ukraine and from its European allies that it cannot be trusted as an honest broker because of previous agreements that they say the Russians have violated time and time again. How would you respond to that?
I would say that Russian side also pursues the same argument vis-à-vis Minsk agreements, which were signed in 2014-15. They were endorsed by the United Nations. France and Germany were part of the Normandy 4 process, which was set up to accompany implementation of these agreements. Now, Angela Merkel told us that actually it was just a delaying tactics to help Ukraine to give it time to arm, train, and prepare for a kind of real war with Russia. So in that sense, both sides have a long list of demands and claims against each other, citing concrete examples when trust was broken. Yeah, some of them are correct, some of them are exaggerated, but I don't think that this is a situation where anybody trusts anybody very much. We have to deal with the situation, which is pretty normal. If we are looking at Gaza, Israel, Hamas, is there trust left? But does it mean that there is no peace process? This is what happens in major international conflicts. But that depends on what kind of verification regimes are there, how much desire is to actually enforce difficult decisions. That would be part of a future peace settlement. We're not get there yet, but yes, atmosphere is poisonous. That is not deniable, but we have to start somewhere. With going forward. Otherwise, we can look at a very chaotic, very damaging and maybe disastrous scenario of the front lines unraveling and much more kind of chaotic end to this conflict rather than what now we are still having a prospect of negotiating settlement when there will be a compromise. Yes, compromises which end wars may not necessarily be completely fair. Some of them are perhaps a bit more favorable to one side and the other, but still there may be an outcome which both sides think is better than continuation of violence.
Olena, what would you say is the kind of the general mood in Ukraine right now with all of these efforts towards some sort of a peace? I mean, presumably there is a lot of war weariness. There has been a huge sacrifice made on people there. But is there still a determination to fight on regardless, or is there a recognition that some sort of compromise needs to be made?
Well, first of all, I want to say that it's important not to say two sides and to say that equally trust is broken on both sides. It's very important who attacked whom. And the trust was initially broken on the Russian side, because if you look for the different interviews of Vladimir Putin, where he specifically asked, will you ever attack Crimea? Will you ever attack Ukraine? He responded always, no, never. I promise you never. And you know what? Ukrainian population actually trusted Russia, because Ukrainian population didn't even believe that Russia would ever invade Ukraine. But guess what? Russia did invade. So let's not talk about trust. And right now, of course, Ukrainians are resilient because they understand that if they don't stand now, if they don't fight now, in the future, their children will be attacked by Russia. Because yes, this trust is broken, and Russia demonstrated that it's absolutely aggressive and unpredictable neighbor, which is waging the genocidal war against Ukraine.
All right, let's put that back to Anna then, that Russia is the aggressor here in that it invaded Ukraine, which is what began this conflict.
Well, we are into normative argument. We are now talking about morality of starting the war. That's, of course, it's a big issue, and there is a very fair point. But morality itself does not end wars. Norms do not win battlefields. International principles do not compensate for war exhaustion, ruined economy, and very little prospect of how long that the whole thing would end and how long the whole thing would last. So we have to be more realistic between pushing normative principles ahead of something which can be much more kind of realistic, and in the end would save more lives and would allow Ukraine to rebuild and reconstitute itself as a country, as a nation, and yes, and come to terms with the situation as it is. So I would say that kind of talking about noble ideas is very nice if we are sitting in our sheltered homes, but but I don't think that it will actually help in terms of bringing a conflict to the end.
All right, let's put some of that then to Jason. You know, the point that Anna's making there, that we can point fingers about who started this war in 2022. But that's not going to, if we're going to be realistic about this, that's not going to end the war in 2025. What do you say to that?
Well, I think it's very funny to say this is normative values. It's a statement of fact. Russia started the war, and it's like saying the person committed murder, but we're not going to judge him. We'll just hope he won't do it again. A murderer is a murderer, and we have to understand he's a dangerous person. In this case, Russia has shown that it is very dangerous. Vladimir Putin, like a dog that bites somebody, he's not allowed to go back in the public. But we have to understand, for the world, Vladimir Putin remains a threat. It should be treated as one. And there should be no normalization whatsoever with Russia or its leadership. And they most certainly should still face trial, like other war criminals have historically, and face justice for their crimes.
Olena, your response to that?
I definitely think that Ukrainians, they don't agree for the point in their original Russian plan, which says amnesty for all. That's, there should be accountability. People suffered a lot. There were horrific war crimes. There were very dangerous perpetrators of war crimes, not just Putin, but a lot of Russian military. These things do matter. for people. And yes, it can be idealistic, but well, it's not really idealistic, it's real, because Ukrainian people are not preaching this. Ukrainian people are living this, and we are not comfortable. Believe me, we're sitting under bombs. We can die any moment, but still, as a nation, we don't surrender to Russia, because what Russia did is very wrong, and there should be accountability.
Anna, how do you respond to what some of Olena was saying there, that there needs to be some level of accountability here?
Well, I think that one point which I also want to refer to what Yelena says, we should not be talking about Ukrainians as completely monolithic. We have seen a large-scale depopulation of the country. We've seen massive immigration, Ukrainians abroad. Very few of them are in Western Europe, in the United States, and in Canada, are determined to return. So the large scale of desertion, we are not seeing people trying to queue at mobilization conscription points. We are trying to see people escaping the country, fearing mobilization. The bribe to cross the border is now up to $20,000. So saying that everybody is prepared to defend defer Russia indefinitely, that is not the case.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you to all of you for this discussion. So thanks for watching. You can follow us on social media and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Hazem Seeker. We'll see you next time.